Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to the show. Sheikh Suleiman, before we went to the break, you were mentioning about the tragic story of your mother, rahimahullah. May Allah have mercy on her, when she received a kidney donation.
Yes, and that indeed, when it happened in 2004, I still remember how happy and pleased the entire family were that it was a successful kidney transplant and she had received that organ. But sadly, we believe in the qadr and decree of Almighty Allah Ta'ala. She did not live long after the kidney transplant. So may Allah Ta'ala grant her Jannah. So in that way, it can be that even though we know that it is permissible to donate an organ or to receive an organ, but there is still no guarantee how long a person may survive after that. Yeah. So this is only, we believe that it is only in the decree of Almighty, because when exactly the time comes when the angel of death comes to take the soul away, no person can increase even a second in the life of a person, because that is in the knowledge of the Creator. But yes, in our human understanding, we do whatever we can to save a person's life. Or in this case, it was only to improve the quality of the life of the person. But that is why it could be that people have different personal experiences in their life, and hence you may have this diversity of the opinions. So the question could be, what is the successful rate after any organ transplant? Even though it could be in some countries that the transplant or the successful rate is really very high. But given that this took place in another country, in another place, in fact it happened there in Pakistan, it could be that they do not, maybe it all again depends on the advancements of the treatment and varies from country to country. So that's all I wanted to add, that we all have to just look at what type of organ one is going to donate, and the issue is who has ownership of this organ. I think that is the main point to focus on, that presumed consent. That is what the concern is. Who does it belong to, your body, in your lifetime and after you pass away?
Sheikh Wasim, you're nodding your head or shaking your head when we were talking about the difference between accepting an organ and donating one.
Yes. Previously there have been no individuals jumping on stories like that Muslims are willing to receive organs but not willing to give. And we've made it very clear from ourselves on this particular panel that the vast majority of Islamic fiqh councils around the world, in our personal opinions, that it is allowed. And the Muslims shouldn't feel that they are not allowed to they are permitted to give. And we want to make that very clear, because unfortunately it's happened in some European countries where MPs they jumped on stories where, and it reached the newspapers and it put Muslims in a bad light. So we want to make it very clear that Muslims, we don't follow that, fall into the same hole on that issue.
Our own example of the Daily Mail and smearing Imam Suleiman Ghani here. So just to summarize the point about there being a distinction, obviously, between a living person donating their organs, right? It can't be something that will cause detriment to, or severe detriment to your own life, or obviously it can't be something that would kill you. But when a person passes away, then the general consensus seems to be, anything can be donated apart from organs of sexual reproduction. But then someone might ask the question, when does that transfer from life to death? Islamically, when does that actually happen, Sheikh Dr. Khalid Khan?
This is where the issue of defining the death comes. So you have to, because this was but just going back to the point that, this issue of Muslims are the receiving end and not the giving, has become a fashion really. If you want to be a good, famous producer, just produce a program and blame the Muslim. They don't give the blood, they don't give the organ, they do this, they do that. So you will become a good producer. So this has, I have seen this repeatedly. This is really a sheer nonsense. It's important that if it is concerned the religious ruling, it comes from the people who are knowledgeable about the religion. If it is a matter which is reflected in the society, this is cultural or the understanding of the people. Some people, they have poor understanding. So they need to be enlightened about these issues. It's important. Coming back to the issue of the definition of the death, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, لَيْسَتِ التَّوْبَةُ لِلَّذِينَ يَعْمَلُونَ السَّيِّئَاتِ حَتَّى إِذَا حَضَرَ أَحَدَهُمُ الْمَوْتُ فَقَالَ إِنِّي تُبْتُ الْآنَ. And a tawbah is not until, for a person who keeps on doing evil action, until the time of his death comes, then he says, وَقَالَ إِنِّي تُبْتُ الْآنَ, I make the tawbah now. So here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala informed us that tawbah continues until maut. This same thing Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam explained in the hadith by saying, إِنَّ اللَّهَ يَقْبَلُ تَوْبَةَ عَبْدِهِ مَا لَمْ يُغَرْغِرْ. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accepts the tawbah of his slave until the gharghar. So this means that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam defined maut means the gharghar, which means when the soul leaves the body. When the soul leaves the body, in fact I mentioned this and somebody was quite aggressively objecting to that. This is something that people who deal with the people dying, they are aware of. That anyone who has seen, they are aware of that when the soul leaves, there is a kind of hiccup that takes place. And there is also contraction of all the muscles that take place. If you have seen, you should be aware of, yes, rigor mortis, that when we give the ghusl to the body, we have to relax those muscles because there is this contraction taken place at the time of the soul leaving. Now, when the soul leaves, this is followed by heart stopping and the breathing stopping. So this is what is defined in the medical science as cardiopulmonary death. Okay, and the death is usually known by those signs of cardiopulmonary cessation.
But can you resuscitate someone after that?
At the time when this takes place, like in the form of a heart attack or what is called cardiac arrest, there is a protocol on resuscitation, and a person's heart rate comes back and he functions. I have resuscitated many people, and they walk out of the hospital.
So from an Islamic definition perspective, would you say that person's died and come back to life then?
No.
If they
not
had
at
that
all.
Cardiopulmonary death?
No, the cardiopulmonary death will not be defined as, when you have the cardiac arrest, you don't say that this person has died. You resuscitate.
Okay.
If the resuscitation fails, 20 minutes used to be protocol, I don't know now, but 20 minutes resuscitation or something like that, and then you fail and there is nothing, then you certify the death. But these are the signs which for a person who is not aware, has not witnessed person dying, that he says, okay, I felt the pulse, there is nothing. I saw the breathing, there is nothing. So this person has stopped breathing, this has stopped. The death actually is defined an irreversible incapacity to gain consciousness and irreversible ability to breathe. This is the basic definition of the death. This is reflected in these two things, no circulation, no breathing. Then that follows the neurological death. This is the third
stage.
That
comes after?
That comes after, yeah.
Okay.
Then after that, then the nervous system dies. All the systems of the body die. But we are talking about the organ donation, which is for a person who is dying. He has to be a specific situation. He's not on the road or the house. He has to be.
This accounts for why there are so many people on the donation register,
yes.
but only 1% of them.
Yes.
For example,
because this person has to be in the intensive care on the cardiopulmonary support. So he's on life support. So on the life support, this is important here. Subhanallah, this is the what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has revealed through the revelation. It comes to show that this is true. That the time of death is prescribed. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will order and the soul will be taken away. But the people think that this person is still alive because his heart is beating and his breathing is carrying on.
So what you're saying is that in an intensive care unit, somebody might be hooked up to a life support machine.
Yeah.
His or her heart is beating.
Yeah.
Their lungs are moving up and down.
Yeah.
There's a circulation in their whole body. But maybe biologically their organs are still alive.
Yeah.
But you're saying because there's no brain activity or
because the soul has left, so
that person is Islamically has passed away.
Has passed away. But the medical science has determined that there is a stage of brain death, which is determined by certain techniques, and this is known to the doctors. So what they do, because they have to decide, do we carry on the life support for 100 years or do we stop at some point? So that's why these tests are done and seen the brain activity is there or not, which is deep coma, the inability of a person to breathe. If so, they detach the life support and see whether he is able to gasp spontaneously or not. And thirdly, they check the brain stem reflexes, which is the center from where all the breathing and the circulation is controlled. So if the brain stem reflexes are all negative, and this has to be done performed by two trained senior doctors, is the regulation here. That they have to carry out these tests simultaneously in the presence of each other, and they come to a conclusion that this person is brain dead. Now,
Is it possible for somebody to be brain dead, or a medical doctor to say, okay, this person is brain dead, and then maybe 5 minutes later, a day later, he
never happened.
Sits up again?
This has never happened.
This has never happened?
Never happened. In fact, this was one of the things that was discussed in the conferences previously. Just to go back, 1959 was, as far as I know, was the first decision that was given, and that was given in Egypt and Tunisia for the corneal transplant. In 19...
So like 50 years ago,
yes,
more than 50 years ago.
So this to say the Muslims are receiving, this is nonsense.
Yeah.
All over the Muslim countries, the transplant is being taken place.
Yeah.
There's no issue in that. 1986 actually was the Jurist Council who gave the approval for the organ donation. And the basis for that was that the brain death is the Islamic death. This is the basis documented.
Yeah.
Okay. So on that basis, then all over the world, Muslim countries, they started the program of organ transplant. But the crucial point here is that the brain death can be assessed medically in the intensive care and declared that this person is brain dead. Now he is on the machine, blood is being pumped through his organs, and oxygen is pushed into. So the organ is healthy. This is the situation. You can take the organ out and quickly transplant into the recipient. If this person has died at home, by the time they will certify the death and complete the process, this will be too late. The organ is useless.
Sheikh Wasim, someone might ask then, okay, fine, if a person's brain dead medically, then that is the same as a person's Islamic death, so to speak. So that's when a person's ruh, their spirit, leaves their body and so forth. But what about the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ when he said to hurry up and hasten the burial of the mayyit, the deceased person? Isn't harvesting the organs and that kind of stuff, isn't that delaying unnecessarily the burial?
Yeah, so you're right. The Asri'u bil janaza, the Prophet ﷺ said, be quick with the funeral proceedings. However, the issue of organ donation, as is mentioned, that if any organs that are going to be taken, that wouldn't really lead to any delay in the funeral proceedings, because that has to happen inside a hospital within 20 minutes of a person dying. And then any time after that, the organ can't be taken. So that wouldn't lead to any delay. Sometimes Muslims are of the understanding that organ donation means that after a person may pass away, then maybe 1 or 2 days later, then they're going to take the organ and there's an autopsy and there's a delay. No, they would, as far as my reading takes me, that if an organ was to be taken from a suitable individual, then that would not lead to the delay of the funeral proceedings. No.
Okay. So that's not an issue then, if somebody were to say?
Not really. So obviously, I just also wanted to add by saying that it's quite interesting that we have a hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. When Almighty Allah Ta'ala speaks about the ensoulment, إن أحدكم ليجمع في بطن أمه 40 يوما ثم يكون علقة مثل ذلك ثم يكون مضغة مثل ذلك. But then it leads to that point where Almighty Allah Ta'ala, when the time of ensoulment takes place, the angel blows the body.
When the fetus is created in the womb, and then the Prophet described the stages,
40, 80.
and then at a particular point the ruh
enters the body,
the soul enters the body.
and بِكَتْبِ رِزْقِهِ وَأَجَلِهِ. So what is also being recorded at that time, how long, what is our risk and sustenance, and what is going to be our lifespan. and also and whether it's going to be shaqiyun or sa'idun, whether it's going to be a person who is going to be, happy in the life hereafter, or is going to be a wretched person. But it's quite interesting that we know that exactly we have to do whatever we can in our life while we are living to save somebody's life. But exactly when I think about my own uncle, means my mother's brother, he was one of the first, I would say, in South Africa, in Cape Town, at the Grootskeur Hospital by Bernard Shaw. I think the surgeon, the heart surgeon, Dr. Bernard, he carried out the first successful heart transplant in South Africa, and that's going back, before even I was born, in the year 1967. And his name is Abdurrahman Suleiman. He had the surgery transplant in 1992, and he lived after the heart transplant for another 5 years.
That was your uncle?
He was my uncle, my mother's sister. So this is the qadr of Allah. It just came back to memory when we are discussing this organ donation, that here is a heart transplant successful in South Africa at the hospital in Cape Town, the Grootskeur Hospital. But then he lived for another 5 years after that. So how do we, it's all about knowing that yes, indeed, it gave him life. But at the end of it, we still believe that that time when the angel of death came to take his soul away, that knowledge is only with Almighty Allah Ta'ala. So yes, indeed, we have to do whatever we can to save a person's life. And ultimately, if it was not successful after any transplant, we still have to have our tawakkul and the reliance that Almighty Allah Ta'ala, He has decreed in His knowledge when exactly the soul would leave the body.
Yeah, subhanAllah. So we had a very interesting discussion, alhamdulillah, today. There is the statistics that the government has released and the Department of Health has released, about the numbers of transplants and donors needed is far less than is far more than how many we actually get. For example, in particular in Black and Asian or other ethnic minority groups. On average, Black and Asian patients wait 6 months longer, for a compatible organ than the rest of the population. So, and this could be, because they have to wait for, an organ from a similar ethnicity person, donor. So the need is there. The need is higher. It can be argued in, amongst ethnic minorities and certainly the Muslim community. So I think it's pretty much for the Islam Channel audience at home. It's pretty much agreed, in our panel that this is generally speaking something permissible. Generally speaking, if somebody enters into this contract with the state, so to speak, and is conscious of this being an organ donor, then they could be rewarded if they enter into that agreement with a good intention that they're going to save somebody's life, and particularly, speaking, particularly when you consider the dire need, 3 people passing away every day because of a lack of suitable donor. So the organ donation consultation by the government is still ongoing. It's going until the 6th of March 2017. We have our opportunity now to have our voice heard, to contribute to the consultation, where the government is asking certain pertinent questions such as, how much influence or how much say should families have in the deceased relative's decision, to donate or not donate organs. When should the exemption to opt out, be available to a person? Should it be available maybe during just like it is now to obtain just when you make a driver's license, or or you're with your family when somebody is admitted into intensive care, or should we have the ability to opt out at many more stages throughout our lives, such as maybe when registering a birth or something like this?
I think on a topic like organ donation, it's extremely important that the Muslim community really should educate themselves about it, so that they can have a say in the fact that there is a need within ethnic minorities, and the Muslims would make up a large percentage of that they can play a good part in their community in supporting the community and so on. So the Muslim really should educate themselves not only on this issue, but on many other issues which affect themselves personally and can also affect the community on a larger scale.
Yeah.
So it's extremely important for Muslims to engage in things like this, not just to sit back and let the things go by them, but to engage, to ask questions and to consult, especially referring back to the people of knowledge, and so that they can be well informed about the decisions that ultimately will come to most of us.
Sheikh Sulaiman Ghani, your final 30-second to the Islam Channel audience.
Yes, indeed. I feel that, as long as we have the good intention, do not belittle any good act. If we feel and sincerely that we are donating an organ, then remember this is for your own intention that you have. Almighty Allah Ta'ala will know, He knows the condition of our heart. Innamal a'malu bin niyat. So with that in mind, at the same time, I would like to say that it should be an individual choice. It should not be something that, it's presumed consent. Let that person, let him know that he still has ownership of his body, and just like he has ownership in his body during his lifetime, similarly, after he leaves this world, his body, every organ still belongs to him, and, we leave it to that person to decide what is better for him in the life of the hereafter. Will he earn a reward by donating an organ? And as was pointed out, yes, indeed, there is ajr for it, there is reward for it, but leave it for that individual to decide.
Dr. Khalid Khan?
Really, I want to point out a couple of points about this opt-out, because this is something the viewer are interested in. That if this opt-out goes ahead, it's important that certain conditions are placed on it. Number one, as you said, that what would be the time of opting out. This should be really with the birth certificate, because we fear that many people will miss out in the opportunity for opting out. So in the 63,000, so 63 million is the population of UK, according to the census of 2016. 63 million population. Who can guarantee that everyone will be aware of this? Yeah. So there is a chance a fair chunk would not know. So it's important that the time and the earliest time would be the birth certificate.
But I just want to clarify, if you're saying birth certificate, that means you're leaving the decision for the parent to decide.
Yes.
And I feel that should be the decision of the individual himself.
I'm coming to that. So the parents decide about the child. When the child comes to the age of consent, then it should be considered as opt-out, unless that individual decide and goes and he opts out. Okay. Second point is that the family should have a say, but this say should be, this needs to be discussed in detail. So if the religion is different, then there will be ethical issues. Okay. So if a person who converts to Islam, for example, then his family cannot have the veto. But otherwise, if their religion is same, then the family should be given the veto in this matter. Okay. Thirdly, that if a person has no family, and a person dies in the hospital, is in intensive care, no family, and he has not filled the donor card, or he is not opted out, in that case, default should be that he has not given the consent. Okay. He has opted out. Okay. So as long as these criteria are met, then we fully recognize that there is a very growing need for organs, and this is for life saving. So this should be facilitated, but with proper conditions.
Inshallah. Jazakumullah khairan. I hope the viewers, Islam Channel viewers at home, enjoyed the discussion as much as I did. I'd like to thank all of our guests. Jazakumullah khairan. And I hope that at the end of this discussion, our viewers at home are able to make a more informed decision and fill out this government consultation in a bit more empowered way. Jazakumullah khairan. I've been your host Salman Butt. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.